Good morning, everybody. I'm closing the door. Sorry about this. There's too much light. Right before we start, I'm just going to talk a little bit about NBES and then after that, we'll go straight to our guests and the topics, the subject matter we want to talk about this morning. So thanks for being here. Just hold on to the short video. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you again for participating in this webinar. We're going to be talking about an important subject and topic, the subject matter, and I will introduce you our guest. But before we start, I want to talk a little bit about NBES. Who are we? What's NBES all about? Well, we support employers throughout the province in the hiring of persons with disability. Our mandate technically is to promote and demonstrate the importance of integrating persons with disability into the workforce. We offer free service throughout the province to employers, and our job, basically, in a nutshell, is to change the employee's mindset with the whole concept of hiring a person with a disability. An important aspect to remember, to note, though, is that we're not client-based. We don't work directly with persons with disability. We work mainly with employers, but we work with agencies like Ability in New Brunswick. We'll be talking about this morning, because those agencies throughout the province are the specialists in working directly with person with a disability. So our job is to change the mindset of employers. Once employers are excited, ready, and willing to take the next logical step, that's where usually the magic by all those agencies, especially like Ability New Brunswick, that's when they kick in. We're being funded by the government of New Brunswick and Canada through the labor market agreement, and we've been in operation for the past 7 years, and we're based out of Dieppe. So technically, today, what do we have? Well, we have an interesting webinar for you this morning, and we have as well the privilege and the honor of having Haley Flaro, who is the Executive Director of Ability New Brunswick. Good morning, Haley.
Good morning.
Thanks for participating in this webinar, Haley. I really appreciate, and I know that you guys are quite busy working throughout the province, but the whole idea this morning about the webinar is to talk a little bit about persons who have mobility issues, but most importantly, to talk about the services that Ability in New Brunswick can offer to either employers but most importantly, to persons with a disability with mobility issues. So without further comments from my end, because the presentation will be made by Haley. Haley, please, I'm going to give you the floor because we have 15 to 20, or I should say 20 to 30 minutes with this webinar. So I'm going to leave the floor to you to talk a little bit about your mission and your organization. Now I'll play along with the slide. You tell me, Haley, if I go too fast or too slow, and I may ask you questions during the webinar, just to make sure that we fully understand the mission, the organization, the service, and everything. So, Haley, the floor is all yours. Please feel free.
Thank you again for having us. This is always exciting for us as a provincial organization to be able to talk to an audience in various regions of the province. Ability New Brunswick has been working in New Brunswick for 60 years. We celebrated our anniversary last year, and our mission is to empower the independence and full community participation of persons who have a spinal cord injury or other mobility disability, and we do that through two ways, through providing innovative services, and we also work on the development of progressive public policy.
If I may, Haley, please, progressive public policy, which means working closely with the province in terms of policy making and so on?
All levels of government, actually. So we, develop position papers. We do jurisdictional reviews. We survey our population to find out what their priority needs are, and then we often present policy or program changes to various levels of government. We know that if we keep keeping people running in to a specific barrier, that we're just going to keep spinning our wheels unless we try to change what that barrier is.
I hear you. Okay, perfect. I hear you. So talk to me a little bit about your history. You've been in operation for the past 60 years, you said, or so over 60 years. Tell me where, because I see Canadian Paraplegic Association, and that got me confusing when I saw your presentation. Explain to me a little bit.
So we were founded by veterans with paralysis in 1945, and essentially we were founded on a national level. It was an individual by the name of John Council, who was a veteran. He was injured by a bullet to the spine, and as the story goes, it was a group of men that had injuries that were stuck in hospital, and John looked at the group and said, we are not spending the rest of our life in hospital. And their efforts resulted in improved rehabilitation services, better pensions, and increased awareness of abilities and potential, because at that time many people with injury were slated for a convalescent home, or going and living independently at home was not something that was very common. So they founded the Canadian Paraplegic Association nationally. That continued to grow, and a division was created into the Atlantic, and then every province eventually developed their own organization. We were formed in New Brunswick and started delivering services in 56, incorporated in 90. But on our 55th anniversary, all the organizations throughout Canada are autonomous, and we changed our name based on pressure from our clients to better reflect the population we represent. So our clients chose Ability New Brunswick to focus on a more positive name. So we're provincial, we're community-based, and we have a volunteer board of directors that governs our organization.
Cool. And tell me something, the other organization in various provinces, do they go with the same name, like Ability Nova Scotia and so on, or are they all independent from one organization to the other, right?
All the organizations are independent, and some of them have changed their name to like Spinal Cord Injury Ontario or Spinal Cord Injury Alberta. In New Brunswick, we don't just focus on spinal cord injury. We focus on all people with a mobility disability. Our population warrants that. So
Okay.
while we're true to our the veterans that founded us, and we work with people with a spinal cord injury, we also work with people with MS, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, amputation, stroke, COPD, and we want to make sure we're inclusive to that population. It makes sense in smaller provinces like ours.
Definitely. I totally agree with you. Yeah, it really makes sense. So talk to me a little bit, though, for the benefit of the participant of the webinar this morning, about mobility disability. What are we talking about here? Just for the, in plain terms, for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, it's a condition that affects the ability to move, so ranging from maybe a lack of coordination to complete paralysis. So many people often think that our organization just works with people who use a wheelchair, but that's not correct. Some of our population might not use anything at all, but might have balance difficulties and not be able to move long distances independently. So the populations we work with, people with spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy, I've mentioned a few of these already, ALS, Friedreich's ataxia, stroke, amputation. I think there's 50 plus types of mobility disability in our database right now and growing.
Wow.
There's so many unique conditions, unique neurological conditions in New Brunswick.
Wow, that's, it's very broad, though. I was under the impression, as you said, like, with all due respect, like it's individual in a wheelchair, but no, it's really broad, though.
It is. Anyone who, again, that the disability impacts the ability to move, our services are free and confidential, and they would be considered eligible for our services.
I like it. That's music to my ears, and I'm sure to the benefits of the participant as well. Talk to me a little bit about stats, though, to give us, an idea about, what kind of segment of population are we talking about here, and especially in New Brunswick.
So New Brunswick has the second highest rate in Canada, second highest rate of disability in Canada, second only to Nova Scotia. And mobility is the most prevalent, the most common disability type in New Brunswick. The estimates are that over 90,000 New Brunswickers over the age of 15 have a mobility disability, which is about 12% of our population. You know, I get asked all the time, why do we have the second highest rate? Why is mobility so common? And there's not one answer. We certainly have higher instances in Atlantic Canada of conditions like multiple sclerosis. We also have, you know, certain we also have the oldest population in Canada, an aging population, and with aging comes mobility disability. They're both quite intrinsically linked, and especially with a lot of the conditions that our aging population faces, often mobility is the most common. So there's all kinds of factors that kind of contribute to those rates, and not any one. We also have a high incidence of, there's really rare neurological conditions among children and youth in Atlantic Canada that seems to be growing. So yeah, we can't point to one specific factor or issue.
Nevertheless, the second highest rate though is you know, among all the provinces, is not something that, let's say that usually when we're on the top, usually we're all proud of it, but this is not something that, I guess, anyway, it's a reality, let's put it this way, right?
Definitely, and that's why our organization always promotes that you really have to have a disability lens when you're creating policies and programs to make sure that they're inclusive to that population. And I often tell the politicians that that's a lot of voters, 16.4% of the population. So it's something to really pay attention to.
You know what I was going to say, 16.4, you can almost win an election, especially if you're down the States. I'm just kidding, but you're right though, you know, it's a big segment of the population that we can't neglect, big time, you know. Wow. Interesting. So is it throughout the province though, if I may ask though, is there a specific area, or, you know, like, it's spread around the province though, among, you know, like southern New Brunswick, northern New Brunswick? I guess the segment of the population is throughout the province. There's no pockets or whatsoever, or maybe where the population is greater, I guess you'll have more individual, but percentage wise, we're seeing the same numbers throughout the province, right?
Our experience is definitely that. I often talk to my colleagues in other provinces who see their population moving to urban centers for treatment and care and services, and they often see about 80% of their population in municipalities and urban centers. But our database shows 50% of our population are in rural communities. From, you know, we're on the boat to Grand Manan, and we're in Wiscoo Island, and 50% of the people we work with are in rural communities. So our population is quite spread out throughout the province, and we're glad to see that people want to stay in live in their own communities and get the services they need. And through our outreach approach, we're glad to be able to deliver that.
But what I know, though, in what you're saying is that your services are available as well throughout the province, which is something that we're probably going to be talking later on. But based on your statement, I assume that your service is available throughout the province wherever the individual will be.
Absolutely. We really believe in that reach model that, you know, sometimes people can't come into services for those first few meetings because you have to address barriers to transportation and different difficulties. So we meet with people where they are and where they want to meet. And that is really critical, I think, to all service models in New Brunswick, that if you want to start breaking down some things that get in the way of people being involved in going to education or jobs, you need to meet people where they are. I believe in what you're saying exactly, because that's how it should be. Technically though, this slide is really interesting. While you were talking, I was looking at the slide as well, but, you know, a lot of time when I meet employers, a lot of employers are saying, well, persons with a disability usually don't have the profile, don't have any education, de-education or whatsoever, but you have some stats here that is quite interesting, and could you go through those stats just to give a perspective about, you know, that particular segment of the population? Because, you know, like, this is something that is really interesting. A lot of employers should be aware of this. Definitely. So we know, and the stats continue to show that people with a disability have much lower education and labor force market labor market participation rates than the general population. And the Stats Canada data, from 2008 certainly demonstrates that. We also know that students with a disability are more likely to leave high school without a diploma compared to students with a disability are more likely to leave high school without a diploma compared to students without a disability, which we continue to see that trend, which is concerning. And only, the IRIS reported several years ago that only 13.2% of persons with a disability have a university degree. So there's some trends we need to reverse here. And another concerning trend is that we see with our population, and that's why we developed one of the programs I'm going to talk about. Students with a disability, especially those with complex barriers, are often left behind in transition planning often due to really high guidance teacher to student ratios. Like we know in the Anglophone sector, it's often about one guidance counselor for 500 students, which makes it really difficult to plan.
So I guess the reality is that yes, there is a gap between persons with a disability versus without a disability in terms of education and so on. But based on your experience, Haley, have you seen some? I guess the changes are not really significant if there was any, but is there anything happening that is taking place that we see a little bit of improvement or light at the end of the tunnel, in terms of support through the education system and college and university that could increase or improve those numbers and assist by the same time persons with disability to get higher education?
I mean, I can speak to our sandbox, and since we launched a few years ago a specialized, we've always done transition planning with youth with a mobility disability, but we formalized a program a couple of years ago called Transition MB to specifically work with youth under the age of 30 with a mobility disability to help them transition through a one-on-one service to post-secondary education and jobs. And the success we've been seeing working with educators and families and social workers has been incredible. It really takes a holistic approach to instead of seeing someone that wants to go to post-secondary. I'll just give you a common example. We would see someone that wants to go to post-secondary but it was so intimidating. They needed home supports to help them in the morning and at night. They needed accessible housing on campus. They needed transportation. They needed funding, extra funding because their transportation costs were going to be more than the average student. The whole list of things was intimidating for individuals, families, and guidance counselors. But, when we look at all of those barriers, we go, okay, let's get started. Like, how can we make this happen? And we see more educators and people in the community taking that approach when they know that we can do it in a team way to try and reach those goals. And we've been seeing such a high number of success with young people going off to post-secondary and getting jobs this year that just never had any planning to be able to do that. So I'm really happy that we have this service for our population that we can work within the education system to make it happen.
That's music to my ear, because that's exactly, we need to improve their level of employability, and it goes through education as well. Everybody needs to have a certain level of education in order to have better access to the workplace. So talk to us a little bit about the obstacles, the roadblocks to education and employment. We already talked a little bit about it, but what else could you tell us about the roadblocks that a person who have mobility issue are dealing with in terms of education and employment in a nutshell?
There's a lot of different things, and it depends on each individual, their situation, their community, and what resources are available. But accessibility and universal design continues to be really critical, especially with physical spaces. Our campuses in New Brunswick are not largely accessible, so we're always having to find unique situations, like say someone that uses a manual chair and goes to UNB Fredericton. Well, imagine you have a class at the top of the hill and the bottom of the hill. It might be fun to go down the hill, but trying to get back up the hill to class, especially with such limited accessible transportation in Fredericton, is a challenge. So we may need to look at options like, we had a young guy that got a power wheelchair just for class time to be able to navigate the campus.
Yeah, makes sense.
Having classes on accessible floors and elevators and buildings, and this is linked to housing, but if I'm going to go to university and pay for a regular dorm room, say it's $300 a month. Well, the accessible dorm room is likely $600 a month. So people, students with a mobility disability, because they require more layout of a room, a larger room often, extended features, are often paying more for their housing. Like, how equal is that? So the fact that we aren't designing things in a way that are universal to all is really putting up roadblocks for many students, and that's what we try to overcome. Sometimes we just can't overcome it. We have a lot of old buildings in New Brunswick, and sometimes people are choosing more accessible colleges or universities over the inaccessible ones, not because they have better programs, but because they need to be able to get in the doors.
Wow, it's incredible. When you're not facing the situation, it's hard to, it's almost a shocker when I hear you talking. It's like, wow, really, huh? Well, when you're not facing that situation, like, you don't know. And it's so true, though. You end up going to a college, university, not because of the program, but based on the accessibility, as opposed to, that's interesting. Wow.
So there's others too. Inclusion. Everyone throws around this word, but one of the things I've been really concerned with hearing the debate lately in the media again about the inclusive education policy and how it's not working. And my population would tell us we've seen lots of successes happening. Inclusive education is about education for all. We now have a policy in New Brunswick that talks about physical environments. We're the only ones in Canada. So we're seeing schools now thinking, you know what, every kid deserves to be on the stage. Every kid deserves to play in the gym with parallel sport and recreation equipment. So when people are wanting to throw inclusion out, I say, please don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because we're seeing better educational assistance support. We're seeing adapted sport and recreation equipment in schools, so kids are no longer on the sidelines. If you want people to be included and involved, policy 3, the inclusive education policy has been a real stepping stone for that. So I just hope we don't throw it out and we start looking at what just needs to be fixed to provide better support to students. But inclusion is really part of it. You can't have kids sitting on the sidelines if you want them to be involved in our broader communities.
Totally agree with you. That's that's what used to be our school system, and we made some progress, and that's music to my ears as well. It's nice to hear that, with education documents that you work on, the policy that came up with. I think it's really interesting. My wife, she's a music teacher in the school system, and the stage has to be accessible for a wheelchair now. It's pretty cool. 10 to 15 years ago, you would have never thought about that, but now there are some progress, which is pretty cool. I like it.
We need good design. It's designed for everyone. Like, ramps are the new stairs. I like to walk up a ramp better than stairs in the winter. It's just easier to navigate.
It's true.
So other roadblocks: affordable, accessible transportation, private or driver programs, or municipal transportation. You often have to book ahead in some communities. It's often not readily available. Many rural communities have these great volunteer driver programs, but not accessible transportation. So we were really excited to be part of the rural and urban transportation strategy that was recently released, and there's some good elements in there that I'm hoping get implemented that will help get more people into school and jobs.
Cool.
Affordable, accessible housing. I talked about that student example, but you need to have access to affordable, accessible housing to go out of community to school or to live independently. And we still have a lack of universally designed housing, accessible housing in some regions. We often really have to hit the pavement to try and find it.
Yeah, definitely. Sadly.
Disability supports. We had a great example this year of where, social development helped fund a person going out of province to have home supports in the morning and at night. So they know at home in New Brunswick, they were able to have support from their family, but away at university, this was going to be a really big deal. So we were able to get funding supports to help that person have home supports, get them ready for school and help with activities at home at night and do well in school. So getting access to attendance and home supports for care, especially if you're going away to school, is really critical. Or if you need attendance support while you're on the job, really glad to see the government partnering with that. We have many people getting attendance services so they can work full time and pay taxes. I have several people that say my goal is to pay taxes, and I say, well, that's not mine, but that's a really I get the
I hear you.
motive behind
Oh
it.
God.
Right? I just want to contribute to my community.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Discrimination, stereotypes, bullying, I'd like to say it's gone, but we still see a lot of young people that we work with a mobility disability getting their differences highlighted in negative ways, and we still need to do a lot to create more inclusive environments. And even as parents and adults, we need to be conscious of our language and how we describe and how we talk about others and how we recognize differences. So I really
Well,
to see this barrier gone by the time I retire in 20 years.
yeah. You know, I was really disappointed when I saw discrimination, stereotypes, and bullying on your slide. It's like, you know, we working in this field, we would think and we would hope that, you know, like, you know, this is no longer, you know, but it's sadly enough, it's still out there, you know, like, and it's something that you and I and everybody, you know, working in this field and people that we reach out to can make a difference down the road. But nevertheless, there's still some work to be done on that particular aspect, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Income supports, people with a disability and single mothers are the two populations most impoverished, impacted by poverty in New Brunswick. Living with a disability is costly. There's adapted equipment and co-payments, and I gave you the example of, you know, it's more expensive for a student with a mobility disability than a student without a disability to find housing in a university. So there's still a lot that needs to be done on poverty strategies for those living with a disability.
Okay.
And, you know, lastly, and I could go on lots of barriers. I don't like to focus on the negative stuff, but equipment and technology. There's so much equipment and technology out there, and it's finding the funding to get access to it, but making sure people know about it. We're running into people all the time that didn't even know that there was eye gaze technology or other equipment that they could use that could help them be more independent and participate in schools. And we need to be really giving the opportunity to people to get assessed for the right technology.
Well, that's the beauty about this webinar, you know, is it was making sure to spread the word about, you know, what are the services available, you know, and maybe after that, you know, people or parents or, you know, employers or organization will have the reflex of calling you, you know, and your organization just to at least to have a better idea about what's available in terms of services, equipment, and technology, maybe because you know that stuff. And most of the time, you know, like if you're an employer and you have no clue about, you know, what could be done to his premises, to their building, or to their, you know, to provide access. And I guess it's all a matter of making sure that they know what's available in terms of services. So tell me something, how employers can break down those roadblocks, access this untapped labor force, because, you know, this is exactly what, you know, I'm excited about, you know, it's like providing access to meaningful employment for person with a disability and person with mobility issue are no different. So how can employers break down, you know, like, and I want to hear it from you because you're the expert on that field, and it's always exciting to hear you giving those examples about situations. So feel free, Haley.
Great. I love talking about the positive stuff. And I mean, Tammy Wright, one of my colleagues from Moncton, who's going to be delivering this session this afternoon in French, we sat down and we were talking about it. And, you know, the big one is create jobs, you know, employers that we need more job creation in New Brunswick. We need more jobs. We have this untapped labor force that's ready, willing, and able to work. And so that's as simple as I can get on that front. Is we need to focus on job creation and with diverse employers in the province. And that's just sounds so simple, but that's one of the big responsibilities. It's not government's responsibility. It's not, you know, it's the responsibility of our corporate community to work at creating those jobs.
Definitely. But at the same time, though, we have to provide them ideas as well in terms of how can they do that, and being flexible and adaptable, though, if you can elaborate a little bit, though, is one way for employers to create opportunities as well, right?
It is, and I, you know, when I say flexible and adaptable work from home alternate schedule, I had someone say, okay, so as soon as I have a person with a disability, should I say, do you want to work from home? Do you want, no, it's looking at what is that person's responsibilities in this role? What are their needs, their goals? How best can we support them? And maybe, on a really bad week where it's just really, we're full of ice on the sidewalks and roads and it's impossible to get the sidewalk at the office clear, that person's able to work from home during that period or have alternate schedules. Really working with the individual to find a solution that would work right for them. And the use of technology. We're a nonprofit and we link in our employees from throughout the province through technology for very low cost. So there's different solutions, to make sure people can do their responsibilities, be accountable, but that we can be flexible. And we're always happy through our disability consulting service, without knowing who the individual is, to brainstorm with the employer about possible solutions. And I love those calls because they wind up with this list of things that they're going to explore, and it empowers them because they want to keep a good employee and find good solutions that often work for staff without a disability too.
And that's the funny part, though. Every time I talk to employers and I do presentation, Haley, that's exactly what I'm talking about. When we talk about accommodations or bringing in something to assist the person with a disability to perform like everybody else, though, is sometimes that technology or those accommodation can be used by everybody else. It's like, wow, it's a win-win situation. It's like everybody benefits from it, and sometimes the employee thinks, well, no, it's going to be a burden because, it's just for that person. No, most of the time it's like, if you have a good employee, you provide the tools to your good employee in order to perform up to the expectation of the employer. So, and it's no different. But sometimes, as you said, and you said something that really, kept my attention, is that sometimes, a lot of people think that people think that it's going to be really costly, but it doesn't have to cost that much, right?
Absolutely. So there's some, desks, for example, that can be adjustable to different heights that are suitable to everyone. Or I'm going to grab here. I have, here's a $50 solution. I have a elevating, it's not up right now, but I have an elevating desk. So when government gets me really angry and I have blood pressure issues, this is a solution for me. I can stand and work at my desk during the day. It was a $50 solution. So it's adjustable, so someone with a mobility device could use it, but it also can be used for my staff that want to take a standing break to be able to do some work for better health or for good circulation. So there's so many, this isn't the solution for everyone, but here was a solution for me to accommodate, me. And I love working at my standing desk.
Wow. You see, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to cost that much, and it can benefit to everybody as well. So, to anybody. So it's pretty cool. Consult with disability organization on strategies. Talk to me a little bit more about what you had in mind when you mentioned that on that slide, though.
I love these consultation calls. I had a couple. I had one just this week about someone calling, an HR manager calling me and saying, I have an employee when we're dealing with this issue, and I want to be able to support them in the best way. We walked out of that. I don't want to get too much in the specifics because we're a small province, but we kind of walked away from that phone call. I didn't know who the person was, but we were able to look at some of the situations they were experiencing and having a whole list of solutions that she was going to be able to look at and propose. Were they all going to work? Maybe not, but there was some that she wasn't even aware of, and funding programs and the opportunity for them. They were willing to hire a job coach, just didn't even know what a job coach was. There's just all kinds of, so those calls, like call the deaf and hard of hearing services, if that's the primary disability, or CNIB, or us for mobility. We're there to answer the phone, answer your emails. We get back to you within 2 working days and have those brainstorm discussions. And because we've been around for 60 years, we know about a lot of these resources. We know our population. So we're not to say we know more than anyone, but we're happy to help brainstorm solutions.
Definitely. And lastly, to be a role model for inclusive workplace. And this is really interesting because, our organization just recently came up with the Leaders of Inclusion. It was an activity to highlight some employers throughout the province that really demonstrate some leadership in regards to diversity and inclusion within the workplace, especially in regards to the whole concept of hiring a person with a disability. But you're right, Haley, like be a role model for inclusive workplace. Like we need to have more and more employers that makes a difference in their respective communities, and it will just create a snowball effect. People will start looking, it's like, wow, it's working there, why not applying that to within my organization or my place, right?
I reflect on this as a person in HR myself all the time because, we need to be constantly thinking about, we need to be the leader, we need to be the role model. And so how strong are our policies? Do I have zero tolerance for active and passive bullying? When we plan social activities, do we have some staff that deal with mobility issues? Are they in accessible locations? When we want to go to the pub after work, are we thinking of a location that everyone can get to with transportation? Or inclusion is about poverty too. Some staff that might be dealing with income, are we choosing group activities that are accessible to all? That's inclusion. As soon as we're starting to leave some of our colleagues out, we're not an inclusive workplace.
And it's true, so true though. So Haley, before we start, we pursue with the services, and you're already talking a little bit about the services, but I guess we'll go a little bit more in detail. I'm going to ask if there's any of the participants who would have any questions. Please feel free to use the chat, and I will interrupt Haley in her presentation and from now on, because we already I'll probably half through, and we're running out of time, so we will go as fast as possible. But if there's any question, please use the chat, and when the opportunity occurs, I will interrupt Haley and ask your question, and we'll go from there. So having said that, Haley, please talk about the services that I'm so looking forward to hear, so that everybody could have a good understanding about where you guys are coming from, where we're at, and where you're heading, especially in regards to services to individuals, employers, and communities as well. So feel free, Haley, go ahead.
Great. So I'll just give a couple of highlights on each of these. Our updated list is on our website at abilitynb.ca, in English puis en français. Our primary services are rehabilitation counseling and transition planning. So rehabilitation counseling is for all ages. Transition planning is for youth under the ages of 30. And not to trivialize these roles, but we work with individuals from our youngest clients, service participant is age 2, and our most senior is 93. So we work with a span of ages. And what the rehabilitation counselors and transition planners are is they're a person that can help plan and look at unmet needs and find solutions and find creative ways to help people reach their goals and link them to resources and help them apply to programs. And we don't just help people develop a plan and walk away. There's constant follow-up and support and productive detours in those plans.
So I was going to say that's an important aspect of what your services is, not just to apply, but to assist. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
We also do case management, service coordination. So sometimes we're the lead role in someone's plan. So when we work with the Stan Cassidy Center, when someone gets discharged, we might be the person that's responsible for helping to coordinate all the services in place as that person transitions home. And we're happy to kind of lead teams so we can all have roles to best support that person. Our vocational employment services, we do this through our rehabilitation counseling and transition planning. I'm going to talk more about that in a slide or two, but basically whether we work with someone on resume development and a LinkedIn portfolio, linking them to jobs, interview preparation, or maybe we refer them to an employment assistance service agency for more in-depth career planning or support, and work with them in that agency. We really the ultimate goal of rehabilitation and independence is education and employment. So whatever we can do to best support that person, we do that through those services. We do a lot of vocational employment services. There's a lot of areas not served by employment assistance services in the province where they can't go out to communities. So we don't have walls, we don't have regional boundaries. Our reach services are a standard part of what we do. That's the frontline team. We have 9 staff, and Tammy can attest, they're on the road all the time, in their cars, in communities, drinking a lot of Tim Hortons. We offer peer support, where we match people that may be going through a similar situation. We match a lot of youth with a mobility disability with other youth, maybe that have gone to the university that youth is interested in, so they can learn about their experiences. What would they have done differently? What was the hardest thing? What was the best thing? So equally, when we have adults that are looking to build new accessible homes, we've linked them with others that have gone through the same thing, so they can ask questions and learn from peers. Peer support's a really great way for mentorship and to get advice from someone who's been there.
Yeah, definitely.
Community development and advocacy, that's a lot of that public policy work we do with government. We were involved in helping draft and write the barrier-free regulation for New Brunswick, which came in place January 1st, 2015, which require as a standard level of accessibility for all buildings and public places. We helped get a pressure relief mattress funding program in place. We were seeing way too many people that couldn't afford $5,000 pressure relief mattresses, and we're spending 1 to 2 years in hospital with pressure sores. That didn't make sense economically or health-wise, so we helped develop the criteria for a program that social development now offers, and we're seeing way less hospital admissions. We have the Para-MB Sport and Recreation program, where we help people get involved in adapted sport and recreation throughout the province, and have over 300 pieces of adapted sport and recreation equipment available for free loan. This is expensive equipment, like $1,000 ice sledges and $3,000 hand cycles that people can borrow for free. And we have a coordinator that uses the network throughout the province to get that in people's hands at home, or like Riverview is going to be using the sledges for an upcoming carnival they're having. So we don't want costly adapted equipment to be in way of people getting active.
Cool.
And then our information services, toll-free number, email, you can, again, we'll get back to you within 2 working days, to ask questions, to brainstorm, to find resources. There's over 4,000 resources available to people with a disability in New Brunswick, and it's difficult to navigate. We've been doing it for 60 years, so maybe there's something that we can help tell you about that you might not know about.
I hope so.
I'm not sure. You have it all. You don't need to consult.
But I had a question while you were talking, though. There was a question that came out on the chat. There was an employer asking the question, and I guess maybe on this particular slide you're probably going to be able to answer that question. But the employer per se was asking, like, if we want to recruit or send job posting, is there any way, shape, or form through your organization they could share with you, because you work directly with clients, with clients throughout the province. So basically, we are non-client client based. So when employers are sending us job postings, usually what we do, we resend the information directly with you agencies, right? Especially the one that we have throughout the province. But having said that, you as an organization, do you have something in place to accept those job postings that employer may have?
Absolutely. They can contact our organization by phone. The information will be here at the end of the slide, but at our info@abilitymb.ca, and we'll circulate that to our entire frontline team. We also have a really big social media reach, so we post them if available on our Facebook or Twitter to let people know about them, and they often get a lot of hits. So we're really happy to share that, and we rely on those. We have a lot of companies that forward us those.
Cool, perfect. So talk to us a little bit about this slide when it comes to training, education, and jobs. You said you can help. My understanding, Haley, and correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of assistance, you can provide the expertise, but funding is not, you do not have access to funding directly to assist either an employer that needs to make some changes and so on through their premises, or a person with a disability, if they need any kind of assistance. You don't have access to funding but directly, but the programs, and you will assist either an employer or an individual to go where the funding is available. Could you give us a perspective how it works?
Yeah, there's a lot of funding available. We help people with Canada Student Grant applications, training and employment support services applications, scholarship applications. Those have been really key in helping people with the added costs of, accessible housing and accessible transportation for schools. There's, inclusive recreation activity funds and Jumpstart. Like, depending on what the person's goal is, there's so many funding sources out there. There's different foundations we work with. So we really help people navigate the right funding, the funding sources that are right for them.
But tell me something about an employer, in regards to, and I'm looking at the employer's perspective all the time because, I work directly with employers. So if I'm an employer and I'm, and something is happening or I want to make some changes, though, can Ability New Brunswick assist me in the layout of my work floor? Or like how to be more accessible, especially for mobility? Is there a service that is available by your organization to assist employers?
We do, through our community development work, we do accessibility reviews where we can review the accessibility based on best practice standards. We can also link, if it's an individual employee that might have individualized needs, link with occupational therapists to be able to conduct formal assessments. We do that quite often, and then we work with the occupational therapist to help find the funding with the individual. So but for general workplace design, we do accessibility reviews, which are quite helpful. We also work with those employers. There's great things like the Enabling Accessibility Fund for employers who have for employers that can apply for funding for workplace accessibility. We've often provided advice and letters of support with those applications. So there is some different resources out there.
So basically, you become the one-stop shopping. If I have any issue or whatsoever, I can contact Ability New Brunswick, and through the contacts and the expertise that you have within your organization and the knowledge of all the services and other programs available, either at the provincial, regional, or national level, you provide a one-stop shop to a certain extent. I could get all the information that I need, or at least you can direct me where I need to go, right?
Absolutely. We get calls about a variety of disability issues and funding programs, and so we'll make sure we connect that person with the right disability organization, the right funding programs, the right EAS agency. We do our best to try and give the best information and find the best organization to support that person. So.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about the Transition NB program, though. You talk a little bit about it, though, but in a nutshell, the Transition NB program is designed for what?
It's designed to help youth with a disability transition to post-secondary education and jobs. So part of that program is we're developing a transition guide for youth with a disability that will be online to help individuals and their families and service providers help youth with a disability transition to post-secondary education and jobs. So that's a research project we've been involved in. But we have a one-on-one planning service for youth with a mobility disability that we help them with all the activities and everything required to develop a plan and implement it, to go to post-secondary, to get involved in training, and to help find a job. So we've been seeing a lot of success with this, with young people who were just simply left behind. They graduated and no one had done any planning with them, and they live in a rural community and didn't have any local services. So we're really excited about this program and the impact it's having.
Well, to be honest with you, from my perspective, the Transition New Brunswick program, like when you come out of the school system and you're embracing, like your adult life, and you're looking at, post-secondary education into one, that's the transition part that is so important. And that program, that's why I was asking you the question about the program, because I strongly believe that could definitely change the whole landscape for a person with a disability embracing their adult life. Once they're done with the high school, that could make a serious impact on their future, right?
Absolutely. We're leaving too many young people behind but we're getting referrals of people 26, 27, 28 for that program as well that have never been given the opportunity. So even if there's someone that mobility disability and 27 years old and would like some help to look at a future, we want to see that person. We'll go and meet with them.
I like it. Haley, time is running out, so I guess, I like asking questions because there's so many interesting things happening with, ability in New Brunswick. It's like we could do a webinar that could last 2 or 3 hours. One of the things I'd like to ask before I let you finish your presentation, though, is I want to ask you the question about the gaps in rural areas where services for artisans cannot travel to urban centers, because, I'm from a rural area myself, and for the longest time, this is a big issue. There are some individuals that, have access to no service available because of, lack of transportations and especially services, but mainly transportation. Is there any way, shape, or form, how can you fill those gaps, though? How can you assist? Under what circumstances?
We live in New Brunswick, and we really need a culture shift in our thinking from a funder perspective, from a service perspective, that if someone calls an organization and wants some help about going to post-secondary training or jobs, we need to be making sure we find the right person or organization to be able to help that person. I'm still seeing people call, areas and hear that, no, we can't, you have to come into our services. We can't go there. And you know what? You got to start where people are. That person might have huge potential, huge opportunity. There might be existing networks in their community that could address the transportation barrier. But until you meet with that person and get to know them and get to know the assets in their community, it's just we're throwing up those roadblocks for people. So reach services, going and meet people where they are, is so critical in this province. It's not enabling. It's we want to learn about you, your assets, your goals, and figure out how we can address some of the roadblocks you're facing.
Music to my ears. Haley, if you could run in politics, I'll vote for you.
not a chance. Let's not
talk about politics here.
I have to start doing my hair, and that's just a no for me.
Haley, listen, let's run to the next, when it comes to training. Let's pursue a little bit about, what you had on the next slide. And I'm not going to ask you too many questions. I'm going to let you talk because, I'm taking time from you. So I'm leaving the floor to you so you can go through the next couple of slides by yourself.
Great. I'm just going to hit quickly. You can take in the visual for those that are following along. I just wanted to give a specific example of, sometimes you hear, oh, we provide these types of services, but these are specific things we can help with. The visual planning tool, the majority of our frontline staff are trained to do paths with people to help develop that positive visual plan. And I find really young people and their family networks are really responding well to that. Often occupational therapists and social workers and teachers are involved. So that's something that we can offer, especially to young people. But we can look at, finding out what jobs are in demand, reviewing skills, looking at labor markets, helping address some of the things that are happening at homes, housing, transportation. We have some really good partnerships with EAS agencies where they'll work on the career planning, and we'll work on the transportation, the housing, the recreation, all the other things that we know if you don't have them in place, life isn't going to work well. You need it all to come together. So
true. Okay. So basically what I'm trying to figure out, though, from my perspective, though, Haley, the intent of the webinar is to talk about the services that you guys are offering, but since most of our auditoire, if I may call it this way, for Invest, are employers, because those are our main target that we're trying to go out throughout the province. So I guess, technically, in terms of services you're offering to your clients, which are basically, persons with mobility issues, the employers could be, to the same extent, part of your target group as well, because, you're offering the same level of service, I guess, to the employers in order to assist them in becoming more inclusive as well.
Absolutely. I had an employer reach out to me before Christmas where they had a staff person that was struggling in their position, and it was nothing related to the job. It was some things that were going on at home about housing and transportation, to recreation. And so we were able to brainstorm it, and then they linked that person to our services for some help. So, it's really a holistic, like that was help solving a job crisis for that person. And their work is improving this month because they're better supported at home. So, it can be as simple as that. Trying to, in HR nowadays, we need to look at our employees holistically and try and be a resource to find ways to help employees be successful in their jobs. And that's just like kids in school. You don't see everything at school. Sometimes you have to go home and figure out what's not working well at home.
Exactly. No, it's so true, though. It's so true. So, and basically, you work throughout the province. We have a testimony here by Kelly Young, but basically, you said from the get-go, from Miscou Island to all the other way around, the southern part of New Brunswick, the other island, Campobello or whatsoever. You will go where your clients or the service are required, right?
Absolutely. We will meet people where they are. Around kitchen tables, is often the best place to learn about someone.
And basically, those are the services that you can offer in further details in terms of develop resume, as you talked about, find job shadowing opportunities and so on. So you will hire staff that needs or services required for anything specific. If they're looking for somebody to do some job shadowing in a specific area, you will recruit or work with agencies, as you said, in order to make sure that you can provide the service, right?
Absolutely. We help people find summer employment. We work with schools to find accessible co-op placements that meet the goals of students. We look at internship, apprenticeship, anything that kind of meets the person's goals and would help them gain the experience that they need.
Okay, perfect. Towards soft training, processing it already. Having said that, and I guess it goes on and on and on and on, as you mentioned, connect with peer mentors, complete student loan, all the things that you mentioned early on throughout the province. Basically, the services are being offered, Haley, French and English as well, I guess, and there are some ways, I guess, to reach you guys specifically, but this slides talk about maybe more specific, because the first phrase is help develop money and budget skills. This is something really interesting, that it's more than just employment, more than education. It's like we're talking about personal matters in order to become independent, especially if you start working with someone in terms of money and budget skills. You go that far?
Absolutely. If someone has a goal and they want to go to college in Campbellton and they're going to live on their own and they've never had a bank account and paid rent, and those are some of the skills that they'll likely identify that they need and supports to figure out before they do that, right? It's not, you can't just focus on the, getting into the program and having the equipment you need, and you need to focus on all the other pieces to help that person be successful. So sometimes it starts with looking at the career or program you want, but we have to look at the other things that'll help support that person to be successful. And we do a lot of, even with adults, we've had 28-year-olds that have never, have never managed their own money or budget or paid rent or budgeted for transportation. And so we can sit down and help develop a plan for that.
Amazing. So basically, you work throughout the province. Your services are technically available throughout the province, but in order to complete the presentation, technically you have two main offices, if I understood. I thought there was three for a reason or the other, but there's two, I guess, right?
Well, we have a sub office in Woodstock that we use as a home base, and we have people that work from home. But every time we get a new grant, instead of creating new infrastructure and a new phone, we hire people work from home so we can put boots on the ground. So, because that's the most important thing right now. New Brunswickers need more services. They don't need us to have walls. So we use technology, to communicate and to do the work that we need to do administrative wise. But
You know, it's so true, though, Haley. I wish that there would be more organization that would put more emphasis on, and it's a free comment that I'm making, but nevertheless, though, you're so right, though. It's not a matter of putting walls together. You know, it's a matter of reaching out and offering services to the clientele that we work for, and that's how it should be, though. I really appreciate what you're saying. It makes so much sense. Who's
And
that, George?
I'll just say employers and businesses and government departments have been so great to us about around the province to give us space to meet with people if we do need a space to pull together teams. And so I love those in-kind partnerships. This is just a quick example of George as someone we work with that he had a fall from a tree. He was out hunting raccoons in New Brunswick and had a fall from a tree that left him with a high-level spinal cord injury. George loved the woods. He loved working with his hands, and his goal after his injury, looking at career exploration, that's what he wanted to get back into. So with the help of just a few $1,000s in funding from the TEST program, they were a great partner in this to help him get some adaptive equipment for his wood shop. George now produces cutting boards and beautiful candle holders and sliding boards for people with a disability, and you probably saw him at a lot of craft fairs this year, but he was able to return to his passion just with a couple $1,000s in
Wow.
adapted and equipment. So he doesn't need to have his workers set up his equipment or set up things. He's able to do it independently thanks to these adaptations.
Wow. You said something really interesting as well. You talk about the TEST program, and for the benefit of the participant, TEST program is a program that is under the Department of Post-Secondary Education, Training, and Labor, and it's to assist a person with a disability in terms of and employers as well, to a certain extent, correct me if I'm wrong, Haley, to provide any type of financial assistance for accommodations and services. Am I right, Haley, in a nutshell?
You're correct. The TEST program, there is the duty to accommodate. So employers, if they do need to look to be able to try and provide the supports and equipment and services themselves. And sometimes it can be a partnership with TEST. Majority of the time, the employers, once they know that it's not that big of a deal, big of a cost, if it's not a big cost, will pay it themselves. But in small cases for small business, we have seen TEST cover some devices for small business employers that have needed where a person has needed something. So it's individual, but the TEST program is a real gift in New Brunswick and really gives people a hand up. Look at George to help just a few $1,000s, right?
That's it. Changes his whole life.
Absolutely.
So how can we refer someone to your organization, even an employer? Haley, please run us through.
Yeah, our toll-free number, our email address as well, that'll be on the end, and someone will get a referral time by phone where we just speak to them by phone and register them with us, and then we assign one of our frontline staff to go and meet with them on a schedule that works for them. So we try to make contact within 4 working days and try to schedule a meeting within 3 weeks for the initial meeting, priority given to more urgent situations. So especially say there was a job crisis, well, we would send someone out as a priority.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So those are the contact as well of your organization, based out of Fredericton. And Haley, just for the benefit as well for the audience and the participant, the webinar has been recorded and it will be shared with Ability New Brunswick, and it will be on our website as well with the link to the YouTube channel. In order for you guys to have access to the recorded webinar. Haley, there's a question or maybe a comment. Let me double check, Haley, if I can have access to it before we finish. I have a question. It's from Dominic. He mentions that we need to encourage ES, pedal, and embed partnerships at an earlier pre-employment age to provide the extra services to those students need. We have worked with many ES providers and pedal to lower age from 18 to 16 to gain accessibility to many ES program support. It would be great if we could develop a database of employers partners that are willing to look at creating opportunities that may not be typical for some of our co-op students. Unfortunately, many employment opportunities for co-op students are in service industries that have physically rigorous constraints in relation to those placements. I guess that's an interesting comments. And yes, there is always room for improvement. But Haley, I know that you've been heavily involved though with NBDEN, and you talk about, if I recall though, in a report that I've seen, you touched that aspect to reduce the age from 18 to 16. Could it be?
Let's see, we've worked with many years pedal to lower the age from 18 to 16. Yes. So that change has been, there's several great things in here. So that change has been really positive because it's helped EAS providers. I'm not sure if he or she's talking about EAS services or the test program, but yes, the age for EAS services or tests has been a barrier because, we're putting people in boxes. So trying to remove those barriers and making sure early EAS services are available to people. We still have a way to go in how our EAS agencies are funded. You get more credit for job placements than you do transition planning or post-secondary. I'm on a mission to fix that before I retire because it makes no sense. We're leaving people behind.
And it's true though, Haley. That's the problem that most of the ES are dealing with. They receive more credit though, and in terms of funding though, it looks a lot better for job placement as opposed to. You're so right though, and that's the nature of the funding system that they have in place, and that should change. I agree.
It is the federal provincial agreements, the labor market agreements. There is more flexibility than we're currently using. And so we just need to keep pushing to make sure it's more seamless. So you and I will keep working on that. The co-op placement is people need to remember co-op placements are supposed to look at the experiential learning needs that person wants. And I agree, Dominic's making a point here that they're often put into these physically demanding jobs, or often some co-op programs have kept the same employers the whole time. And when we work with the school and our individuals, we want to know what type of agency, like organization, business would you like to work in? And then it's the co-op placement coordinator, and we can support that role to go out and find with that individual, get the accommodations, the transportation, the right fit for them. We can't be placing all people with a disability in the school cafeteria because there's no transportation. It's supposed to be based on that person's learning goals. So we have more work to do on that, Dominic, too. Thank you for your comments.
Interesting. Thanks as well. Well, having said that, Haley, I guess, we talked for an hour and something minutes, and I said early on 30 to 40 minutes. Listen, Haley, I just want to thank you very much for sharing some interesting information about ability in New Brunswick, that segment of the population as well, what you can offer in terms of services, and especially the way you operate. I think it's really interesting that people to know that, your services, even if you have two offices, physical offices, your service is available throughout the province. It's just a matter of reaching out to your organization. And I'm sure that your organization will be more than pleased to reach out and offer services regardless of the language and the region throughout the province, which is pretty cool. Haley, I just want to say again, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to have you on board this morning. This afternoon, we'll have your colleague to do the French webinar. Once again, for the benefits of all the participants, we will share the recorded webinar with Ability New Brunswick, but it will be as well on our website so that everybody can, if they didn't have a chance to participate this morning, will have a chance to at least look at the video of the recorded webinar. If there's anybody who has any questions, the coordinates, we'll put on our website the coordinates of Ability New Brunswick, and you see ours as well, and we'll be more than pleased to answer any of the questions that you may have. And yes, Dominic asked a question on the chat. If the participant could get the PowerPoint presentation, if Miss Haley Flaro is willing to allow me to share, I'll be more than pleased. Haley, are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely. We love to share things, so that's how we make things. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Dominic, thanks for your question again, and we'll make sure to share with you we have your email address, so we'll share with you the PowerPoint presentation. On that note, thank you very much for your participation, everybody. Haley, thanks again. I owe you one big time. It was an extreme pleasure. And please follow us on either Facebook, Twitter, and on our website. There's all kind of activities and webinars taking place throughout the province on different time, different occasion. The whole intent is to provide as much information as possible to employers and agencies about the services available out there. And most of the time, what we're trying to do as well is to bring down those barriers, making to show a different perspective about individual with a disability, that they can contribute to society in no different way than anybody else. And it's just a matter of, having an open-minded way and having the right tools sometimes in place in order to allow everybody to be successful as everybody else. So having said that, follow us. We'll be more than pleased. And if you have any questions, as you can see, we are so shy. Please feel free to send us an email or whatsoever. On that note, thank you very much, Haley. Thank you very much. We'll see you and talk to you in a bit.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Merci. Bye-bye.
Bonjour. Nice.
Thanks.